god, that's a f***ing phone.
Quiet, where is it?
Camera, come on.
That's an English.
Give it back.
Hello, you are listening to Dark Static. Welcome back. I'm Alex Schiffer. I'm a sound designer, voiceover artist, and a writer, and this is Zach.
Hey, I'm Zach Mahoney. I'm also a writer, director myself. Yeah, thanks for giving us a second chance.
Yeah, after letting you guys all in about Cannibal Holocaust, I don't know. It's good that you gave us a second chance. Because if you haven't watched that movie, but you listen to the show and you're like, oh, I'm gonna give that a shot, and you don't hate us, then congratulations, because it's gonna be a little bit more smooth sailing from here. I'd say the films after that one are a lot more watchable, especially with our pick today, which I think are very watchable. I actually don't know your full opinions on it yet. But before we get to this week's topic, by the way, this is a podcast about found footage films, where we take deep dive into every found footage film that's been released, and that includes movies, some TV, video games, some web series, analog horror, a whole bunch of multimedia. And before we get to this week's episode on the McPherson Tape and the remake of the McPherson Tape, Incident at Lake County, the actual story behind this movie is quite an interesting one. It's not as controversial as our last episode, thank God.
Yeah, we started with literally the least tasteful, accessible movie we could possibly start with.
Yeah, sorry if we alienated some of you with, but it sucks that we had to start there, because I would have, if it were up to me. Well, I mean, it is up to me. I would have, but I wanted to do it this type of way, and I wanted to start from the beginning where it made sense. But I would have totally put off the Cannibal Holocaust episode for a while, just so I didn't have to talk about it. But
now that we've done alienating you.
Oh yeah.
Hey.
What
yeah. What about the McPherson Tape?
Yeah, the McPherson Tape. There's a lot of good story behind this specific film. That if you haven't seen yet, it is. If you haven't caught on to Zach's amazing segue, this is a alien movie. From back when people really gave a shit about aliens, I think. That's kind of a whole thing that I wanted to start off, going into first. I think there's a few alien abduction movies in the found footage catalog. This is definitely the most notable, or these two movies. We are going to be talking about two movies, by the way, but they're very interlinked. So I think we're going to go in and out of each interpretation pretty regularly, and they're made by the same person, so it's pretty legitimate. It's
they're
not like
almost the same exact movie.
Yeah, when you watch them back to back, there's a lot different about them. Both in the structure, not the structure. I mean, narratively, they're both the same, but like the presentation of both films are going to differ quite a bit. What I wanted to talk about first was the kind of whole alien abduction craze that it kind of went in and out. I'd say the 90s probably had a big alien abduction craze.
Oh yeah,
definitely. Personally, I think a lot of kids had like a fascination with alien abductions. I loved watching like crazy alien abduction shows on like the History Channel. There was Ancient Aliens, actually. You're probably thinking about like Ancient Aliens, but that honestly came later, I think. I didn't really watch a lot of Ancient Aliens, but there was always some crazy. It was my dad. My dad was always watching some crazy fucking alien abduction show on like the History Channel, and it was I was always just sitting there watching it with him. It definitely got me into sort of like an alien abduction craze. I think a lot of kids are very fascinated with aliens in general. I don't know about today's kids. It's probably very different.
No, I'm gonna guess. Well, I mean, let me tell you about the youth. I'm gonna guess that they're not in the same way. I also just feel like there was a time and place for being able to be into aliens in this way without it then becoming like a whole bunch of other things.
Absolutely.
Like, because I had like a cousin who was like, super into the concept of aliens, and I still think he kind of holds on to that side of him that was like super fascinated with like UFO abductions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think what it was at the time could only have existed at the level of technology and like that existed during the 90s, basically, in the late 80s.
Definitely. Like early internet videos about like alien sightings hit different, basically.
Yeah. That shit. That did hit different. It hit different.
It did. And it's where I found for the first time the McPherson tape. I remember stumbling upon, I think I was in 5th grade or something like that. I don't know if anyone listening remembers before YouTube. Well, actually, it was during, like, YouTube was a thing, but they weren't bought by Google yet. But Google had their own video service called Google Video. And I would watch Google Video. I would like look up alien abduction videos specifically on Google Video. And one of the videos was the entirety of the McPherson tape, but it was the remake of the McPherson tape that aired on UPN. It wasn't the original one, which is actually I've watched for the first time for this show. So it wasn't that one. It was the one he made like 10 years later for TV, and if you don't know the story, yes, there was an original McPherson tape that was kind of lost for a very long time. And that movie was just the McPherson tape, which was made by Dean Alioto, who directed and wrote both the McPherson tape and the remake Incident at Lake County. And he decided to just make this movie for almost like close to fucking nothing. Maybe like $6,000 was what he was given, was what he had to make the McPherson tape. And that movie was shown like a few times, but then it was lost because the facility it was in, I think, burned down. And the distribution warehouse it was in burned down. But then it was found, and it started going around these weird UFO abduction circles, like UFO conventions, and people that genuinely believe in UFO abductions. And it was being passed around like it was real, footage of aliens abducting a family. So it kind of gained this, like, I guess you would call that like a cult fan base, but people really believed it was real. It got Alioto a lot of notoriety in that circle. It got him famous enough to make an appearance on a show called Encounters. And basically on that show, he was like, yeah, I'm the director. Like, I made that movie. And like, he completely like shut down all of the fascination, I guess, like that it was real. But people still didn't believe him. Like, people continued to like not believe that he was the real director, and still decided that the McPherson tape was real. And after this interview, he was approached by UPN. If you remember UPN, I don't know if UPN's a thing anymore. But I remember UPN. I used to watch fucking Friday Night SmackDown on UPN when I was a kid. So you could have been watching Friday Night SmackDown, and maybe you caught well, I don't know if it was during this time, but yeah, no, it definitely wasn't. This is 1998. But you might have caught Alien Abduction Incident at Lake County, which is the remake of the McPherson tape. That was, again, directed by Dean Alioto. And this time he had a much more substantial budget. He had about $1.25 million.
Jeez.
Which, going from 6,000 to 1.25 million is unreal. And
1998 money.
Yeah, in 1998 money too. Yeah, so he was approached to make a remake of it. And that's kind of what we get. So now we have these two films that kind of relate to one another. These two found footage films that are, in their skeleton, they're the same. But once you watch both of them, especially like how I watched both of them back to back, and I really liked that experience.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I watched this when I was a kid, I thought everything was real on the internet when I was a kid. And so I watched the remake of the McPherson Tape, Alien Abduction Incident at Lake County, not knowing what it was, and thought it was completely real. And I didn't understand what it was until years and years later. Honestly, 2019, when all of this stuff about the McPherson Tape came out, because the film was finally screened. The original film was finally screened at I think Fantastic Fest 2019.
So you just held this in like somewhere in your head as like a weird thing that you saw when you were a kid.
Yeah, and then when I started reading about it, like, oh, this movie premiered, this lost found footage film premiered at Fantastic Fest, and I was like, oh, cool, what is it? And I'm looking at it, I'm reading about it, and I'm slowly beginning to realize that this is that video that I watched on Google Video when I was a kid. It like unlocked something in me.
That's so weird. It's crazy. My first reaction to all of this is like, this is wild that it has this much history behind it, because I had literally never heard of this movie before until you said we were going to watch it.
Yeah.
For the show. And it is notable that like this type of thing happened, and it predates the Blair Witch phenomena, because this is basically that, but
it does, yeah.
I guess on a more niche scale, because it doesn't go beyond like UFO enthusiasts. But back in the 90s, that was like, I think, a bigger part of the population than, at least in America, than it is today.
It was definitely a bigger cultural phenomena. Whereas now, like, UFO documents get released all the time, and people are like, we don't give a shit.
We don't care.
Show us. Yeah, we don't care. Like, show us a fucking, show us an alien, or I'm not, like, we're not dealing with it.
You're totally. They did at one point. They tried to do some sort of leak on aliens. Like, when was that? At the beginning of 2020 or something like that?
Yeah, it was like during COVID. It was during like the lockdowns. And I guess the government decided like now is a better time than, like, no one's doing anything. Now is a better time than ever to release all this UFO stuff. And then people are like, we need a vaccine. Like, we don't, like, take all this alien shit and shove it up your ass. We don't need it right now.
There was a time and a place.
Time and a place.
Wow, innocence lost.
Definitely.
Yeah.
As you said before, Zach, this predates Blair Witch still. In every found footage film that we're going to talk about, at least in these first like crop of episodes, there is going to be some sort of story behind it, which I think is really interesting, because this is kind of before the studios, the big studio system really gets their paws on the found footage craze, or the found footage craze hasn't really started yet. There's kind of just these little films that have cool stories around them, or very controversial ones regarding cannibal Holocaust. And they're really interesting. Like, even Blair Witch has an awesome story about it too, and we'll definitely talk. That episode's going to be awesome. But for this one, I think the story behind the McPherson Tape is definitely a very enlightening one. Just about one guy, basically, him just kind of wanting to make an alien abduction movie with whatever he had, and it getting picked up for a TV special, and also gaining this niche fan base. It is still like a kind of a funny story, And these are kind of going to be the last of the funny story found footage films that that happen on this show, because once we get around the 2000s, it's going to get a little more bleak, let's say.
Oh, really?
Not to say that Cannibal Holocaust wasn't bleak.
Wait, yeah, we've done 2 so far. So
bleak is in like a greedy, like, yeah, is in like a greedy way. Anyway, Zach, we'll start off with Zach. What did you all around opinions on what you thought about both McPherson Tape and alien abduction incident at Lake County?
Yeah, and I'll probably end up peppering my opinions as we talk about it a little bit more. But at first, I thought I wasn't gonna have a lot to say about it because it is like a really bare bones.
Yeah, it's
like,
simple,
back basics, just like Mama used to make, like movie. It's interesting, like the unique flavor of the movie feels less unique in the year 2022 than it probably did when it came out. I mean, people thought it was real, and it was used as a tool to, I guess, recreate the War of the Worlds story, or that occurrence. That it was almost like their attempt to recreate that sort of.
The classic alien invasion story.
Yeah, or well, specifically where people tuned in halfway apparently to this War of the Worlds reading over the live radio and thought that they were listening into a real alien invasion story. But the original movie is like, it's kind of not great. like I had fun watching it, but as a movie, I mean, the remake is superior, but also it's hard to go back and watch them as films because they don't quite have, if you don't have the context or the nostalgia and you're not living in the 90s without the internet, then what you're just watching is a found footage movie. And without that hook of, without you thinking that it's real, without you thinking that you're tuning into UPN and you're just seeing family being assaulted.
Right after Friday Night SmackDown.
Yeah. Like literally just in between global news. It is just kind of like a very typical movie. And it kind of has a poor sense of pacing too, I felt like.
And these are short. These are short movies. The first one is like literally just 1 hour.
Yeah, and they feel like they last a while because most of it is just people sort of playing the improv game, and it's made to look like, I can't tell if it's made to look like one shot or if it literally one shot.
The first one is one shot.
The first one is one shot. Okay, that makes a lot of sense because as you watch it, you can feel the actors playing the improv game and trying to like yes and each other. But I think the problem is that when they try to sustain that for like an hour straight, they don't know what things to exclude and what things not to in the middle of a conversation. And there's no way to cut it out because it's all one take. So they'll just end up expounding upon like background details about the family. Like, oh, it must be harder ever since your husband died. And it's like, what? I'll say that. That's not something anybody would ever say to another person. And in the remake, there's a similar line where he's like, oh, I wish you'd tape your dad.
I wish Dad was here.
It's like, this is not a way that like people talk to each other, but because they're doing one take and it was improv and they were just trying to add a little bit of character, they're screwed. Like they have to include it because there's no way to cut. So as a movie, it has these like odd moments where in any other movie you would just cut it out. And even in modern found footage, they don't really have those kind of extra rough edges.
Yeah.
They can just kind of trim it off.
Surprisingly, for like a lot of found footage movies that are supposed to be, a bigger illusion of realism than your, bog standard, fictional, traditional narrative, editing is still very important. And at least, speaking for the first one, it's funny that that's something I could have used because I think I was talking about last time how some like heavy editing in found footage can be very, very noticeable and take you out. And you always feel like most found footage should be one take, but you watch something like the original McPherson tape and you kind of see, there's still, that's not always the case. There's still seams that are very noticeable even without a huge amount of editing.
Yeah, even the previous movie, Cannibal Holocaust, when you get to the found footage stuff, that is edited. That they 100%, time jump and skip around.
They get to the point a lot. Footage. Yeah, they get in Cannibal Holocaust specifically. It's more like get to the point. It's always getting to the point.
Right. Yeah. And to that, like, and see how back then this was still a new thing and they were experimenting, and the point was we want to convince people that this is real. Whereas now nobody's saying that about a found footage movie.
No.
Everybody knows it's a movie. So they're just trying to make a movie. Back then they were saying, okay, what are all the things we can do to make this feel like we actually, found this tape somewhere and we're showing it to you.
Yeah, it's more about the gimmick than it is the actual technique.
Right, exactly. So you have this like form of naturalism that I think like now you would say is very expected and kind of cliche, but back then it was probably super convincing because nobody had seen, at least in mainstream culture, we had not seen that form of acting and that form of like dialogue in a film. And so if somebody had just stumbled upon it, basically no way they would think that this was a movie because no movies looked like that. No movies had actors speak in that way, even though now it's super obvious that like
super
so
common.
Much of it is. But yeah, like the overlapping dialogue too. Like they're constantly talking over each other.
Oh yeah. Well, so I mean that kind of gets to my whole thing about these movies. This is actually going to be pretty interesting because I think in some ways I prefer the first over the second. I prefer the original over the remake. And it's for a couple of different reasons. Bridging off of what you were getting at about the overlapping dialogue, I constantly feel like that's how natural the dialogue is. And if you don't like kind of, introducing like what the actual setup is, it's basically like a Thanksgiving dinner. Someone is recording their Thanksgiving dinner and that leads into alien stuff that happens. What I think the most about the first one, about the original movie, is that the dialogue, yes, it overlaps. Sometimes you can't even like make out what people are saying. Like the mic quality is fine. Like you can hear what most people are saying, but you can never like easily focus in on different parts of the dialogue. It's really not that easy. And it all kind of comes off as white noise. And that part I actually appreciate because I feel like when you're at these types of family gatherings, that is kind of how people interact. At least I feel like that's kind of familiar to me at least. Family members always talking over each other and talking about different things. In the first one, it's a lot more natural to me, I feel, because what the characters are talking about, even well beyond the introduction of the aliens and, the main setup of the film, there is a lot of talking about nothing in the first movie. Like I remember in a lot of different, like there's so many instances in the first movie in the McPherson tape where they worry about, what the aliens are going to do. It's like, oh, I saw one over there. I saw one of the, oh, they're coming in. But then there's a lull in the first film and they'll get back to like,
should we say real quick? I'm not sure if it's worth mentioning. Like the movie is literally like people are at a dinner. A couple of them go for a walk and they see a spaceship.
Yes. They see a spaceship and they are basically, it becomes a siege movie.
Yeah.
After that,
they're hunted
with the aliens trying to break, and they're messing with them, which is all of that stuff is done better in the second movie, and we'll get to that. In the first movie, it's very more about, I'd say the first movie, it's more about presenting all the events as a real thing. Whereas in the second movie, it's more about presenting it as a movie, presenting it as, it's almost like the remake is a fictionalized version of the first movie that's also fictionalized.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
So what I was kind of getting at was like, in the first movie, you have the family members, like, it always comes back to, and they do this in the remake too, but they always keep trying to play cards with each other. Like, they keep trying to forget about what's happening, and they just try going back to playing cards. And that happens a couple times in the film. And you get like a lot of like, you can feel the dialogue is very improvised. But it comes off, I feel like it comes off pretty well, because it sounds like how your family might interact with you. Like, and they talk to the camera, and they'll be like, "Oh, how are you doing in school?" Like, "Oh, anyway, forget about that. How are you doing in school?" and stuff like that. And it's like, that's kind of, I feel like that brings me in a little bit. It brings me into the world a bit, the world of the film a bit more than in the second film, which is a lot more staged, I feel.
Yeah.
That should be kind of obvious. It is definitely not staged as in like, oh, it's fake. Like, yeah, of course it's fake. But I mean, staged as in like the traditional sense. Like, every movie you see is staged. Like, one person has, a line of dialogue, and then then there's a beat, and then another person has a line of dialogue. And that's kind of how the second movie plays.
Closer to a semblance of like, they're trying to put together character arcs. Like they one of the major threads is that one of the family members has a boyfriend who's black.
Yes.
And they brought her home, and then the husband or her, I believe it's her dad.
They're all brothers. The dad of the family is passed on.
Oh, right. Sorry. No. So it's the older brother, I believe, has an issue with that. And that kind of plays into sort of him becoming more aggressive as the movie goes on. But
there's actual family drama in the second one, whereas in the first, it's just like, this is a regular family. And in the remake, it's got to be like, this is the most interesting family in the world.
Yeah, like too much happens.
Yeah, too much is happening with the family to really like be like to have you ever like consider that this is a real tape, Whereas in the first, like, obviously you're not going to think that's when you see this now, it's like, obviously you're not going to think this is a real tape, but it definitely like treats itself like it is. Which is why I think I appreciate it artistically a bit more.
I can see that. I guess my only issue is I agree. Like, the first movie is more convincing, but I still just can't.
It is still very bare bones.
Well, it's bare bones, but also even though it's more convincing, it's still not. I think I had this thought while I was watching that, like, it's because of the internet that this can't work anymore. Because we have just seen back then. This movie is presented as like a home video that they're recording, right? And they don't have cell phones or anything like that. And if you think about the amount of times that people were, on average exposed to video content, like, they probably took that home videotape out of the basement like twice, every few years or whatever. Like, they barely look at that thing, right? I think most people, it's just a very once every 10 years thing. You like go into the basement and pull out your old dusty home videotapes and then pop them in the VHS player.
Yeah.
But now we're so exposed to, we've literally watched like dozens of smartphone videos that are both real and staged, and our ability to detect what is BS and what isn't is like way higher, because we know exactly what real people talking on the camera sound like.
Yeah. Don't get me started on paranormal TikTok.
Paranormal, yes, yeah, because that's just all like they're doing the same thing, but it can't work anymore, because back then, I don't know how often somebody in the 90s without a cell phone was exposed to real footage of someone talking. So they probably didn't have, a frame of reference the same way that we do.
Yeah.
Where we immediately look at this and go on just like a primal level, like, this is fake, this is fake, this is fake. Whereas other people are like, wow, they're not talking anything like the guys in The Godfather. Like this must be real. Like, it probably felt more right to them because they weren't like as immediately familiar with what like real footage feels like, because they literally consumed less of it. That was my
yeah. They were less plugged in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. I will say I think there is an endearing amateur quality to the McPherson tape that isn't really in the second one. There's still a little bit of sincerity in incident at Lake County, but the first one definitely I think better realizes it, especially with the camera. And I think it's a better. So in the McPherson tape, the camera is straight up like a camcorder you would find anywhere. I think it was very common for the time. So it really does just look like anyone's home videotape. The first one. The second one is a little bit cleaner. The audio is a little too clear, and that doesn't like take you out or anything, but it's something that when you watch both movies back to back, that is something that you do catch on. But something in the first film, this predates, at least the McPherson tape predates Blair Witch. And one of the best things about the Blair Witch Project, and we'll get more into that in that episode, is the fact that the camera isn't really ever pointed at anything very interesting. All you hear is audio cues about like, oh my God, what is that? What is that? Oh my God, stop. Like, and to me, that is a little bit more scary. Like that's scarier to me than showing, like pointing the camera at something, like a guy in makeup or, in this case, I mean, well, the aliens themselves are very like your generic green aliens, which they look kind of funny.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to.
Yeah,
because I think you're making a good point, and I totally agree. But now that you've mentioned the aliens, I just have to say that when I got to the part where they see the spaceship,
in which one?
In the first one.
I
mean, they're both not
the best. Yeah.
But not the best. I was like, people thought this was real. That's wild. Because literally an alien dude, like a little man, like a guy,
which is just like a kid, which is just like a kid in a suit, basically.
Yeah. Like a kid in a suit walks out, and it's like the most alien ass alien. Like think of an alien in your head, and that's what these are. Picture the Lisa Frank coloring book. And then you go to like one of the pages, and it's like an alien and a UFO that you can color in. That's it. Which they do like in the first movie. They show like one of the like biggest plot points is like the kid is drawing the aliens, and it's literally like they look at it and they're like, oh my God, like where did you get this? And the drawing is literally like alien, like green alien with black eyes, and that like your whole description of what you perceive an alien to be. Like when you think of an alien in your head, that's what you think of, like the classic green little alien guy. It looks funny, like it looks super dated, but still funny. Like it's still pretty endearing to me. In the first one, it's a little bit they don't show
them a whole. They show them definitely a lot more in this second one, but they still use them sparingly in both. They don't really call attention to themselves ever. And again, like I said in the first one, the camera is never really pointed at anything interesting anyway. So aside from the beginning where they go out, where they go outside and see the spaceship for the first time, and then at the end where there is that scene in the middle where they shoot one and bring it inside, and you kind of see a little bit. You just see like a thing in a blanket, you can't really see a whole lot of it. And so that, and then at the end of McPherson Tape when they walk through the door, and it kind of just cuts. And in the second one, you see a little bit more of them. Like there's the one outside the window. There's the one they see in the attic, I think, or one of the bedrooms in the upstairs that they shoot at through the door. I like that whole sequence, by the way. But yeah, kind of getting to like a scene by scene basis. There's a lot more notable things that happen in the second movie, in the remake, than in the first. The second is definitely played up to a bigger audience. So there's a lot more action going on and a lot more things happening at once, even though in the first, a lot of people are just talking over each other. And it seems like there's like this aura of a lot of stuff happening, but there's a lot of voices and screams going on. And I think that's all done very well. And the second, again, like I said, it's all very staged. It's all traditional dialogue. And in the remake, it's a more traditionally, set up storyline. So, the movie begins in the remake and, everyone kind of has their own personality. Whereas in the first one, everyone's just kind of like a family and just kind of regular people. But this family, again, has to be like the most interesting family in the world. So you get weird dialogue like, man, I wish Pa were here, or and stuff like that. Or, I heard Mel's bringing a black boyfriend over or something like that. And it's like, oh, man. The writing isn't the best, and the acting also isn't the best. There's also like a scene where the brother peeps.
Kurt, will you put that shotgun down and come down? Come sit down and eat is the line. Kurt, will you put
there's some great lines. There's also one of my favorite lines in the second one is I think the mother's like accusing them of being high, and then one of the brothers is like, we are not. His delivery is so funny. He's like, we are not high. He sounds like that. The entire vibe is immediately different from the first. There's even like a scene where in the beginning where the cameraman is, the guy holding the camera is spying on his older brother who's like making out with his girlfriend in the bathroom, and it's like, and the point like, you'd better delete that. You get one of those scenes, which there are going to be a ton of scenes like that in the future with some of these movies. So yeah, immediately the whole vibe of the remake is so different. And it gets, and so more stuff actually does happen. Like there's a lot more visual effect or a lot more special effects, and since it is UPN, the special effects were actually done by the same people who worked on the X-Files, which is kind of funny because a lot of the special effects in the remake are just like, the aliens have laser pointers and they're supposed to be like heat rays, which is always always a funny effect. But actually, like some of the production design, like the melted car, like the melted car engine and the melted shotgun, I think are pretty well done. There's also a scene where like all the lights go out. And then there's this high pitched squeal, and then things are like blasting off around them. Like things are like short circuiting. And I thought that was pretty well done. And yeah, there's definitely a lot more, like action, like interesting, like action that happens, in the film.
Right. It does feel like in the remake they were able to come up with some cool concepts for like alien stuff. Like some of my favorites were well, actually it's not even a matter of budget sometimes. Some of them are just like cool concepts.
Yeah, they had a lot more fun with this one, I feel.
The heat ray gun you were talking about is kind of terrifying because usually you actually don't see the aliens using it when people are being hurt by it. Like all of a sudden, like they're just in the house hanging out, and then all of a sudden, like their hand starts burning or something.
Yeah. Or there's the scene at the end where the backs of their necks start burning. Like all of them do that. Yeah.
It's super unnerving. Like this idea that they're just like frying them from outside the house. Like it's just passing through the walls of the house and like,
yeah,
just kind of like deep frying these people. Or at one point the dad is like kind of waving the shotgun around, or sorry, not the dad, the brother is waving the shotgun around. You're he's getting ready to take on the aliens, and at one point he puts it down, he comes to the table, I think he leaves it for a little bit, but then the camera stays with the gun in the room, and there's a little girl who starts to unload the gun because she's getting like, you can kind of interpret through just the acting and the way that she has been acting in the last scene that she's getting like a subliminal message, basically.
Yeah, she's being like mind controlled in some way. By the aliens. The kid in the second movie is a lot more annoying than the kid in the first movie. They're both like the same character, but the performance of the girl in the second movie is a lot more annoying. I think it's just the voice. I don't know.
Yeah, I just thought that was a cool concept. Like, how's the family going to get out of this one? Where it's one of the ways that the aliens have figured out how to dismantle them is by getting the little girl to unload the gun without anybody even knowing that the gun.
That's actually one of my favorite parts too, because it's very apparent in the second movie, especially that there was no chance for this family. And the aliens had complete control over the situation at every given moment, which is pretty terrifying. And I think both versions of the movie are very bleak, but the second one especially is a lot more bleak, especially with the interpretation, of both of their endings, which in the first one, it kind of just ends like when the aliens finally do enter the house and just kind of walk in and the camera cuts to black. And then there's a little bit more that happens in the second one, where, it ends the same way, like the whole family's playing Go Fish and then the aliens enter. But there's a lot more commotion at the end until they all just decide to give up and leave with the aliens, which is it's a pretty like sad note to end the movie on. But definitely effective. I think definitely pretty effective.
Yeah, no, and I mean the scene right before is like the kid who's recording everything, or the younger brother, like breaking down in a bathroom, like crying.
He actually gave a good performance.
Yeah, it was pretty good, and I can't imagine seeing this like that on UPN, because that's where it definitely gets me. Where like the one thing that the remake definitely has. In terms of believability, is that there's like an official source telling you that this is real. And how are you going to disagree with UPN? But
how are you going to disagree with VPN?
Or I guess why would
why wouldn't you believe anything that happens on VPN?
Yeah, I trust everything that the news tells me all the time. No matter the station.
There are parts though, I would say, like I've been very positive. I think about both films in general. But I think definitely in the second film, in the remake, there's a lot more just ridiculous things to get through. The first one that comes to mind is the scene where one of the boyfriends is making out with the other guy's wife, and he's like, I thought that was you. And I just thought that whole scene was ridiculous, being like, oh, they're still fucking with us. And it's like, you could, like, why did you include that? That scene to me was pretty ridiculous. But I mean, other than that, there isn't a lot of bad. I mean, just like the performances in general, the way dialogue is delivered is very jarring when you're comparing it to the first one. Also, in the second one, in the remake, there are these awful, just completely fucking disastrous cutaway segments that make it seem like that make it seem like a documentary. So they cut away to like the county sheriff, who says like pretty much nothing, and then it cuts to like a visual effects artist that is actually, as I find it, is Alioto himself. Is playing the visual effects artist, and he's like, that's funny. So it's funny to see like, yeah, dude, like I'm a visual effects artist, but I've never seen anything like this. Like this is all real. There's no visual effects in these in this film at all, which is really funny. But then there's one that's this musician, this like British rock musician, and he's like, man, you see something like that on TV and it just messes with you, bruv. And I'm like, what? Why did you include that?
I have a note about this specific guy.
Yeah.
I guess his name is Julian Bond, because that's what I wrote down.
Yeah.
And as soon as he started talking, all I could think of was this one Futurama bit where in my head all I could hear was, I said, that's the -- 1 record. Which, like,
wait, I like know what that is, but I can't put my finger on the scene and who says it.
Since I was 10 years old, that's been living in my head. Just Phil strums out this tune, yeah. I said to him, that's the #1 record. That's just like that's my go-to way of envisioning what like pretentious 70s douchebag
British rocker. Yeah, like British rocker would sound like. Yeah, and that's basically like who this is, and I don't know why they include him. It's like you're interviewing Sting and you ask him about the Bud Dwyer tape. Like that's what this is.
Yeah, why?
I saw it on TV, and it's just messed with me, bro.
Why did they interview him? Was there?
I don't know. I don't know why any of this is in the actual film.
It's really bad. Yeah,
like it really and it like the movie will freeze, like will pause at very like distinct moments where like the most is happening at that moment. And it'll cut away to one of these interviews that just are completely asinine and take you out of the entire experience. Yeah, it's weird. But yeah, moving on from that, I don't know if you have anything else to say about those interview segments. I just think they're fucking hilarious.
They're really funny. No, I do wonder if they worked on people.
I don't know. Like that part, I don't know how you can fucking be fooled by that. Like those, especially like the way they perform, like the visual of like Alioto playing the visual effects artist being like, yeah, man, that's all real. And the fucking British rocker guy, like I don't know how that fooled anyone.
No, my only thought is like, maybe if it was on a tube TV and it was like super crappy quality,
and you were watching it a sleepover with your friends.
Yeah, and you were already like half in the bag. Like you were like basically
you're watching it with one eye open.
Yeah, you're like, oh my god.
I was like that. I was actually like that the other night. I don't know if you've watched Cursed Films. on Shudder.
Yeah.
The other night, so season 2 just aired, and the first episode was about the Wizard of Oz. And I was watching it like half asleep, and I woke up. I think I dozed off for a moment. And I woke up to the part where they're talking about the hanging Munchkin, and all I could think about was like, and the way they were like talking about it, I was like, yeah, that definitely happened. I was so delirious where I was like, wow, I can't believe that Munchkin just hung himself. So yeah, if you're watching the McPherson Tape or incident in Lake County, you might believe what you're watching. But anyway, is there anything else that you kind of want to say? Because I feel like I kind of got it all. I think I got it all out. I think I kind of said what I needed to say about these films. I like them in pretty endearing ways, but I think I agree with you in the fact that like as standalone films themselves, they don't hold a lot of merit. But I do respect the hell out of Alioto for just kind of, filming what he wanted to film and getting and it leading to some sort of success.
Yeah, no, because it feels like he's been pretty upfront from what I've read that like he was just trying to make a movie with no budget, and this was like a good way to do it. And he didn't really intend for it to get lost, then found, and take on this status. And he's pretty much always said, like, this isn't real. This is a creation. And I think I don't know if it was like when it aired, but the remake does end with credits.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the McPherson Tape doesn't end with credits.
I guess maybe people don't watch all the way. Although if you think it's real, I don't know how you don't. But I guess once you've decided. I don't know. But like when the credits start rolling and it says, Dean Aliato as VFX supervisor, and he's also the director. I don't know. It's super. I mean, it is a super fascinating view into the conspiratorial mind, and at least like a more innocent way, where just people wanting to believe that like the universe is big and there's weird aliens and creatures out there.
Basically, like people that really like X-Files that are actually like like the truth is really out there. Yeah. Basically, all the Mulders of the world.
Yes, yeah. All the Mulders who could watch this and see the like spirit Halloween aliens walk out of the like retro spaceship and go like, "Oh my god, they're finally here!" Like not they don't miss a beat. Like no, I think that's all it said. I mean this movie was pretty like it makes sense. This is one of the early ones.
Yeah,
it feels really like simple.
Whereas Cannibal Holocaust was a very unique experience, not just because of like the controversy and the actual content of the actual like content of the film, but just because of its structure and how it like one part of it is the live action, the other part is like the actual found footage part. Whereas this, you kind of get into familiar territory, something like Cannibal Holocaust. That's not a movie that you're ever going to see ever again, where you've probably seen a lot of movies like the McPherson Tape, but I think the amateurish quality and the, brings a, level of the sincerity of it that a lot of other films can't replicate. And yeah, I do think it's worth watching. I do think both of them are worth watching, especially since they're both free on, you can watch them on YouTube. And they're easy movies to just kind of sit back and watch and have a good time with, I think, especially if you're especially the second one too. The first one, I don't know, even though I respect it a lot more on an artistic level, I think their remake is the one that's pure entertainment to me. So that's kind of the McPherson Tape and alien abduction incident in Lake County. You have any last thoughts about it?
No, I mean, I wish we could go back
I wish we could go back to a simpler time.
We could go back to
1998. Yeah, next week on the show, you might be thinking we're going to jump straight to Blair Witch, the Blair Witch Project, but there's another movie. There's another movie in between. I'm going to try to sandwich in between. You ever hear of The Last Broadcast, Zach?
This one I do know. Yeah.
We're gonna cover The Last Broadcast. I can't wait for that. All right. As always, thanks for listening. This has been Dark Static episode 2. Zach, you got anything to plug?
No. I have an escape room that's opening. That actually has maybe a room that has a lot to do with the 90s and potentially UFOs in it. But yeah, I do have an escape room business that's opening up in Rochester, New York.
The McPherson Tape Experience.
Get the fork out. So, if you ever wanted to live inside of the McPherson Tape and experience it yourself, we might be able to accommodate you.
Where can people find out more about that?
I think if you just search right now, I don't know when this podcast is going out. Right now, as of recording time,
a year from
now, the business has not yet launched, but we are hoping by early summer of this year, 2022, that it will be open, and you can find it. I mean, you would just be able to type in "get the fork out" or GTFO escape rooms, maybe throw in Rochester, New York, and it should come up. We will have a LinkedIn and Instagram, all that stuff. And so if you live in like the greater Rochester, Finger Lakes area, or you find yourself coming through, you should maybe plan an escape room sometime with friends, family, corporate outing, team building thing.
I've never done one of those things.
Never done one of them?
I've never done them, no. I've always wanted
They're
to.
really fun, yeah. I mean, if you get a bunch of people together.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that next time you're here? We'll do that next time you're here.
I think that's a great idea. I bet New York has a lot of great ones.
Oh, yeah. They're all really expensive, though, I think.
Oh, awesome. Great.
I mean, just like New York, yeah.
I mean, it's high quality, but we're not gonna.
Hell yeah. Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Schiffer Audio. You can follow me on Letterboxd too, also at Schiffer Audio if you like. I also have, I have other podcasts too. I have, if you haven't listened to it yet, I have an entire audio fiction library. I'm actually getting a website set up soon that can just link you to all the shows that I've worked on. Right now, completely finished is Inheritance, part of the Ash Falls universe. And you can look for that wherever your podcasts can be found. I also have a show on Audible called Stillwater Bay that you can find on Audible as well. There are currently 5 episodes out with the 6th episode coming out pretty soon. Anything else I should plug? Major Hi-Fi, I guess. Like reviews on audio gear. If you're an audiophile, I review a lot of headphones, IEMs, things of that nature. And of course, the podcast, Dark Static. Once it's out, go on. You can give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Let us know what you think about this show. Give us a comment. It'll definitely help us out a lot. On Spotify too. I think Spotify has a rating system now too. You can rate us 5 stars. That would be great. That would be very, very nice of you guys. But yes, thank you so much. Again, this is Dark Static. Join us next time for episode 3 on The Last Broadcast. Thanks again.